I was born in Ohio and raised in Michigan, but if you know anything about our history, you know that used to be part of Virginia. They call it the old Northwest Territory, right? So when I got it signed here, it was like a dream come true every time I wake up in the morning. I'm waking up in Virginia. But I actually could trace my lineage all the way back to John Rolfe and Pocahontas, too. So, and that's true. I can do that for you. Well, in my opinion, when we refer to Elizabeth Warren as Pocahontas, we're doing Pocahontas a grave disservice. Yeah, she's, well, anyway. So, my background is I'm also a naval officer. I retired from the U.S. Navy as a lieutenant commander with 20 years of service. Thank you. How many veterans in the room here? Yeah, thank you, gentlemen, ladies. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I was a surface line officer. I drove ships around the world for a bunch of years. That was a lot of fun. I got to meet a lot of different kinds of people. My undergraduate degree is in history. And if you're a history student, you know history is just nothing more than studying about people. And so you end up going to different places and you end up doing different things as a sailor, as a student of history, because you're looking at the people and trying to figure out how they got where they are from where they started. And it's been fascinating for me. I'm a former high school teacher. I taught history and Bible for several years at Stonebridge School, which is a private Christian school. Yes, I did. Thank you very much. Stonebridge is a private Christian school in the Western Branch area. But as I've gone along my journey a little bit, I've figured out that I was more there as a student than I was a teacher. Because I learned so much there that I'd never known before, and I'm just a better man for it. And I'm really, really happy about that. One of the things thank you, I really appreciate that. It's given me a foundation that really prepares me for this job you guys are going to. I also taught Bible. The foundation of my campaign, and let me read it to you because I like the way I wrote it. Restoring traditional biblical principles to government and to public policy. I believe that we are, as a culture, where we are today because people like us, with a biblical focus on life, have stepped away from the battlefield.
That's right.
We've stepped out of public office. We've quit involving ourselves in the public policy debate. And when we stepped out, other people who think very differently stepped in. And now we have a situation where we are today. And we're just scratching our heads and shaking our heads thinking, how did we get here? We got here because people like us stepped away. Okay, and we have to reverse that. Latoya's already fired us up on that. I want to fire you up some more. We have to engage. We have to engage. Bobby Scott is of the other worldview. And you can see it in his voting record. He votes to increase people's dependency on government. Okay? From my perspective, from a biblical perspective, the only dependency we should ever have is a dependency on our Heavenly Father. Not on our government. Okay, when we're dependent on our government, we're substituting something else for God, and that's an offense. It's an offense to God, it's an offense to me, and hopefully it's an offense to you. I've been a right-to-work spokesman. Right-to-work is a big issue in Virginia right now. We're in danger of losing our right-to-work status or seeing it watered down. Well, we need to fight that tooth and nail. I mean, right now, Virginia is a pretty good place to have a business. But if they destroy the right-to-work law we have here, we're going to see that status go away pretty quickly. We're also going to see prices and costs go up, especially labor costs, and there's a problem with that. I'm a former veterans advocate. I worked for the Concerned Veterans for America for many years, advocating and pushing policies against politicians up in Washington to make them do right by our veterans. You're welcome. I'm really proud of that association. I'm really proud of that association. One of the signal things that happened while I was part of the CVA was we got the Mission Act passed. Now, if you don't know anything about the Mission Act, it's worth spending a little bit of time on your favorite search engine doing. Okay, we've been able to make health care in the civilian field much more available to veterans who need it. The Veterans Administration healthcare function does some things extremely well, but they're not everywhere in the country. And some veterans end up driving 6 or 8 hours one way just to get to an appointment. And more often than not, they get there and find out the appointment's been changed. Okay, there's a lot of problems in the VA, but we are on the road to fixing it, and we can thank our amazing president for stepping up and helping us with this. So, let's see, what else have I been? Oh, I'm a Cub Scout leader. Any of you all former Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts? I bet you have Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts in your lives. Yeah, I love doing that. I love working with the boys and introducing them to the bigger world outside of us. I'm also very active in my church. I go to church just up on Volvo Parkway here. I'm involved in leadership of a couple of life groups. I'm an usher. I do a lot of other volunteer efforts with them. So that's kind of who I am. I hope you like me already.
Yes.
Thank you.
And you clean swamps too.
I do. I don't know if you heard what Stephanie said, but I clean swamps too. I was actually doing that on Saturday with a bunch of conservative, wonderful people working in Portsmouth. So you can probably imagine I'm strongly pro-life. I got a little set of baby feet on my lapel here. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. But when I say I'm pro-life, it's more than just about the choice issue. God's greatest gift to humankind was life. That's life from conception all the way to your last natural breath. And that incorporates the Second Amendment, right? We have the right to defend our lives and the lives of those precious to us. Okay? So when you say you're pro-life, you really need to be pro-life, the whole thing. Say pro-liberty. Okay, I'm taking this from Thomas Jefferson. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I am pro-liberty. What are the things that limit our liberties in our world today? Democrats, thank you. The Democrats vote for policies that reduce our liberties. We sell our liberties for what they call security. Okay? All kinds of security. And I'm just opposed to that. We are created to be free. That was our original condition. If you literally believe the Bible's true, then our original condition was one of pure freedom. And we sold it. We sold it for a little bit of knowledge. Okay? But when Jesus Christ came back to the earth, he gave us our liberty back. Yeah, isn't that true? He brought us the gospel of liberty. Okay, but what he brought for us was a gospel of liberty that gives us our vertical liberty back, our freedom from a sin nature. But there's still all this other stuff we had to work out on the horizontal plane to regain our liberties. And it took us a long time to figure it out. And I believe the United States was the first real example, the first real opportunity of a people who were exercising liberty in every facet of their lives horizontally among themselves. Now, they didn't get it perfectly right because we had to have a civil war a couple of years later. Okay, it's not been easy, this liberty thing. But I'm strongly pro-liberty. I'm pro-private property. Okay, one of the things that limits our private property is eminent domain. It's issues like taxation. Taxation limits our liberty. It limits what we can do with our private property. I want to see taxes lowered. I want to see more restrictions on the use of eminent domain. I'm pro-family, as you might imagine. I want to see more jobs because one of the things that families are really suffering with is just, well, not so much now with the president we have now, because we have a booming economy. But under the Obama administration, we were seeing families just with no income. They couldn't find work. You probably know people that were struggling like that because the jobs were going south. They were going other places. And there's a lot of things that President Trump's been able to do get us back on track for that. So when I say I'm pro-family, I'm pro a robust economy. Because a pro-family situation ought to be a father and a mother, children, dad providing, maybe a mom providing, but opportunities for that. That kind of goes along with pro-education. I'm a teacher, right? I'm a teacher. I think that parents ought to be the sole controlling agent of what their children learn.
Amen.
Right now, the federal government exercises undue control over the education that goes on in our public schools in the United States. Do you realize that this June, 3 million new socialists are going to graduate from America's public schools? 3 million new socialists are going to enter our voting blocks, our workforce. We definitely dropped the ball. The parents are less and less control over what their children can learn. I want to see the federal education department completely eliminated. I mean, we aren't going to be able to do that overnight. Too many people are dependent on it right now, but we need to phase that puppy out. That needs to go away completely. President Reagan tried to do it, and it was just too hard for him. We need to take a long view at this and eliminate the federal government from any education of children. Okay? The way they do it is with money. The way they do it is with the money. Okay? They say, if you don't teach, if you don't have a curriculum like we say you should, then we're just going to withhold funds. And of course, funds are really important when you're managing big buildings and large staffs. So that's how they do it. So I want to see us push to block grants, the big education budgets out to the states, let them manage it much closer to where the families are, where they can actually have some influence over it. Also, I want to see parents with more opportunities to have their children homeschooled or schooled at a private school, if that's what they choose. Okay. Well, I think vouchers is a good idea, but I think it's an interim idea. Okay. Vouchers are still controlled by a government. Let's just not tax the people for the money they spend on education for their children. Let's make it a tax credit. Let's go there ultimately. Let's phase it in. Okay, as a former naval officer, I'm very pro-veteran and pro-military. George kind of touched on this in his foreign policy perspective. Our nation's most precious resource are our young people. And when we send them overseas on adventures, public policy or foreign policy adventures, and we are putting at risk our most precious resource. And I am strongly opposed to that. Our military department is there for one thing, the defense of the American continent and our people. We are way too involved overseas doing stuff that other people ought to be stepping up and doing. And I'm really behind what President Trump is doing. He has pulled back a lot of our forces. Now he's going to have to be able to send troops out and reinforce positions from time to time. But I love the way he has resisted going to war with Iran when they've been poking him in the eye on a couple occasions. But he was very measured in his response. Okay, and I think we can all agree on that. He's an amazing and very, very measured man, and I appreciate him so much for that. I mentioned I'm the Right to Work Committee person, so I'm very strong on the right to work issue. And I am pro-immigrant. Most Americans that are here today are from an immigrant base. Whether you came here because you wanted to or they came here because they had to, we are all from another place, typically, unless you're Native American. So we all have to be immigrant focused, but let's do it the right way. Let's always do it the right way. You're never wrong when you're doing things the right way. Now, there's reform that needs to happen, and I'm all about making sure that does happen. But we need to honor the immigrants who are coming here doing things the right way by making it possible for them to get in and make their contribution to our life and our lifestyle. The last thing I want to close out with, actually there's probably more than one, but I'm trying to make it quick because I don't want to overwhelm the other speakers. But y'all know who Randy Forbes is. Randy is a patriarch for our community. He was a great U.S. representative. But what you may not know is that Randy was an expert on China. And I'm kind of in the place right now where I can't imagine filling in those shoes, but I am going to do what I can to become an expert on China, because China, in my mind, is the single greatest threat the United States has from another nation. The Chinese Communist government is completely and totally opposed to what we are about, who we are as a people, our value systems, completely opposed. Now, I love the Chinese people. In fact, just last week I went to the Shen Yun performance at Chrysler. And if you haven't seen that before, you've probably seen the advertising. The thing that's so cool about that is it's a revelation of the Chinese history, which goes back 5,000 years. And the Chinese government is trying to suppress the Shen Yun performers. They're doing what they can because they're shedding light on what's not happening in China anymore. Okay, and there's all this oppression and suppression over there. It's horrific what's going on over there. Now we have this virus. Okay, I don't know if it's true, and I'm not a huge conspiracy theorist, but I believe there's a very strong possibility that a biological warfare plant in China, in the same province where this stuff started showing up, had something to do with this. Okay, and we need to be very concerned about that. Very concerned about that. You know how much of our economy is dependent on China? It's shocking. It is shocking. We need to wean ourselves off of China. That's not going to be easy. Everyone in this room has something made in China, I mean, probably. Okay. Because they're undercutting us right and left. So China is one thing I wanted to talk about. The other thing is, and this is why I'm so excited about campaigning this year. Bobby Scott, as you know, has been up there for 28 years because the district was created for him. It's been so hard to run against him because it's set up for him to win, for someone like him. Okay? But things are different this year. Not only do we have an amazing president who has a track record that is just getting everyone's attention, okay? But about this time last year, I was up in Richmond. It was in early March. It was a miserable Saturday. It was raining. You know, it's like in March when it rains here. It was cold, but there were about 400 people up on the steps of the Capitol. There was something called the March on the Mansion. And nearly everyone up there, about probably 85 to 90% of the people on the steps that day were African American. And they were up there because they were there to protest the infanticide policies of our governor. You'll remember that Governor Northam came out and he talked about making a baby comfortable and letting it die. That was what they decided. And that just shocked all of us. And then he had an opportunity a couple days later to back off on that, but he didn't. He doubled down. And then a couple days later, we find out that he has a very racist, bigoted past from even his adult years, okay, when he was in school. Well, all these people, including a handful of white folk like me, got up on buses and we went up there and we heard speaker after speaker after speaker. Most of them were black pastors. They were all godly men and women. And they were talking for the first time I ever heard about someone called Margaret Sanger. Y'all know who she was? Yeah, she's kind of the founder or the best articulator of a system of thinking called eugenics. And she's the founder of Planned Parenthood. And those black pastors were talking about how Planned Parenthood and the eugenics philosophy is all about eradicating from the North American continent the black race. Because they were racial superiority people. Talk about white supremacists. They were. And they still are today. And Bobby Scott routinely supports legislation to promote Planned Parenthood. I don't get it. I don't get it.
He's an ambulance chaser.
He's an ambulance chaser. Okay?
Paid to do this to the, like the
I get it. But from a philosophical or even a theological position, it just doesn't make any sense. So I believe that we have an amazing opportunity this year, not only because we have an amazing president, but because things are changing in the Commonwealth. And more people who typically vote for the opposition party are rethinking their position because they've left them. The party has left them behind. They're murdering the babies. They're keeping them in a place of just above the poverty line. And it's got to stop. It's got to stop. If we are... Is that for me too? Do I have to stop? So I just want to close. Thanks, LaToya. She's so gracious, isn't she?
Yes, Latoya.
Yeah. So I believe the way to victory in this race, in this district, because of the way it's arranged demographically, is to reach out to our black brothers and sisters who believe like we do. The gospel of Jesus Christ, the gift of life, the gift of liberty is for all of us. It doesn't have a color. We are one race. We are one blood. And we just need to show them that we care and we are just like them. I believe I am more like them in the way they believe than Bobby Scott is in the way he looks. And I'm just really excited about bringing that. Thank you. Geoffrey Burke. That's Geoffrey with a G. I'm running for the 3rd District candidacy, and I have a ballot petition here for you.
Please sign his ballot petition, guys, if you guys want to.